All right, now that I've got the neck mostly ready, I'm going to turn some attention back to the body. This has been sitting around for quite some months now since I put the oil finish on, and it's really dried out quite a lot. I mean, it still looks and feels pretty good. That's an understatement, I think. But it has dried out a bit, and there are some parts that have raised, like that crack along there. Well, you know, a very small crack in the surface, which has raised up a little and feels a bit rough. So I'm gonna take off the nice looking hardware, store that in a container while I continue to work on it, and I will re-oil it and do another fine sand as I go, just to smooth it off again. So I'm just applying more of that tongue oil blend, and I'm doing it with a piece of 800 grit paper. I think I did this before. It was a long time ago since I last showed you me doing this. But instead of holding a piece of paper, I was using a sander on a slow speed with wet and dry, well, with a very fine disc on it. This time I'm just doing it by hand. Now I'll do the whole surface again, front and back and sides. Any very fine dust that is created when you do this, I mean, some of it will wipe off, some of it will be packed down into any very fine cracks that exist. I mean, there are some big cracks. Those ones that I partly filled with resin, that wasn't done perfectly, but it still looks good. But any really fine cracks, the dust will pack down into those, which just adds to the smoothness of the finishing surface. Of the resulting surface, I should say. So we'll do this side and part of the sides. Let that sit for a few hours. Then come and buff it all off, turn it over, and do the other side. You can't really do this too much, like it's never going to start getting worse. It will potentially keep getting better, but you could do it forever, so you just have to reach a point where you're happy with the result. Before I put the electronics back into the cavity and then do further wiring once the pickups are in. Oh, hello, got a fan. His name is Thatcher. I assume it's because of the colour of his fur matching the late Margaret Thatcher. Anyway, I say I assume because we adopted Thatcher. He was already named, so I can only assume. I digress. Before I put the electronics into the cavity for the final time, I need to think about shielding. I haven't shielded before. I've installed electronics in a couple of guitars, but not shielded. And shielding is a good idea. It just reduces the amount of noise. I say a good idea. It's a good idea if you want to reduce the amount of noise, and I assume most people do. Not everyone is a fan of shielding, and that's fine. You don't have to. But there are a couple of ways to do it. One way, which I think looks a little bit easier, is to paint the interior of that cavity. I suppose there is only an interior. Where would the exterior of that cavity be? Paint the inside of the cavity, all the surfaces, with a paint that is electrically conductive, made from graphite, I believe. And you can buy this from, well, a number of places. It is a little bit pricey, and I don't have any. It would require waiting. I might get some to try out in future, but because I don't have any now, I'm going to try something else that I bought some time ago for this purpose, and that is copper tape. Yeah, seems like it should work. So, without further ado, let's try that. So here's how I'm going to do this. I've just put down a few strips of tape. I haven't cut them out yet, obviously, and I'm sitting over them the template for the cavity in the back so that I can draw onto the tape the shape of the cavity and then, well, cut the tape out accordingly and place it in. I need to be aware that in the cavity I did just make a little bit of extra room there for some wiring, so I'll bear that in mind when I do the cutting. Just like that, that's the shape. Right, let's get to it. Right, so I've adjusted the drawing with a little bit of extra room there, as described previously. It doesn't matter if it's very slightly oversized, because the ends, the edges of the tape will bend up the walls of the cavity, which is fine. It's better than too small, I suppose. That'll be fine. Okay, what do I do now? I guess I just stick it in. Let's get this guitar over here. As the oil is still a recent addition, this coat anyway, I've got the guitar sitting on the towel. Now, disclaimer, I've not done this before, but look, how difficult could it be really, he said. Famous last words. That's how difficult it could be. It could roll up straight away and stick to itself and come to pieces. That might be doable still. That might be... That should be doable. Should be. Getting your fingers in there is a little bit fiddly around the edges. Okay, looking all right though. Looking all right. And what's good is that it's metallic on both sides. So when you're sticking one piece of tape over another, you've got a connection there. Those will conduct from one piece to another as well. And the last piece for the bottom, I'll put a wall of tape around the edge as well. And the idea is that all the controls will then be sitting inside a box of conductivity surrounded on all sides. So I'll put this tape on the back of the cover as well. Okay, so far so good. I'll cut out a few pieces to put around the edge as well, and we'll come back shortly when this is done. And that's done. Isn't it shiny? And I've put a little bit of foil just there to make sure that the foil on the underside of the lid has good contact with the foil inside the cavity, so that when I put the lid on, everything that's in there is now completely surrounded by foil. Well, there are holes there, but mostly. And I shouldn't let any cavities miss out really, so I've taken the same approach to the pickup cavities and the back of the scratch plate. I'm doing the part of the job that I sometimes complain about, the soldering, the wiring. I took a slightly easy path, which I've done in the past as well, and that is on eBay from China. I got a pre-wired guitar wiring harness, which means that based on the description, you know what you're getting: 2 volumes and 1 tone and a 3-way switch, so you're getting all the right parts, and they're connected together in the right way as well. They're soldered up, so you don't have to do that part of the thinking. It's not incredibly complex thinking if you've got diagrams to use, but that part is already done. The one thing you do need to check is the quality of the solder joints. A couple of these broke quite easily and I had to resolder them. So it was almost, but not quite, like wiring it myself, because I only had to do a few of them. Now for pickups, I've got 2 humbucker pickups sitting in the scratch plate there, ready to go. I'm using a brand called Artist Guitars, and if you've heard of them, you might think, well, gosh, that's a bit of a budget brand to be using. It is, so it has the benefit of being cheap, but I tell you what, the type of pickup is called the Bullbucker. So this is the Artist Guitars Bullbucker pickup in neck and bridge position, and they're really good. They sound, in my opinion, better than the Seymour Duncans JB, which is kind of a standard for rock guitar sound. I think the JB is used in a lot of Gibson Les Pauls, and these really do sound good by comparison, and they're a heck of a lot cheaper. I believe there's a YouTube video out there which does a side-by-side comparison of those of these with the Duncan JBs. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll put the link in the description to this video. But they're really good. And they didn't pay me to say that, but they're just, look, I recognize quality. See, sometimes you pay less, you get lesser quality, and you have to fix it yourself. But not always. Not always. Don't think that you have to buy expensive parts to get good parts. That's sometimes true, but not always. Right, I'll wire this up. And then I'll do any final spot checks on the neck. It's one of the first necks that I made, so I expect the fretboard to be low quality, so I'll just check the leveling and crowning, and then we'll see how this thing sounds.